Right. Again, welcome to Creative Job Search, tools of the job seeking trade. And what are jobs? What's the bar none tool for job seeking? It is resumes, and we're going to talk a lot about some of the meat and potatoes of the resume world as we go through. So. Just as an FYI, I will be having a list of attendees for today. We'll be marking that inside of the Minnesota Works accounts, but you would still want to make sure that you log that as a reemployment work and action that you're doing for the creative job search modules that we have. Of course, you can attend all 6 sessions, all 6 creative job searches, and I actually encourage everybody to because it's chock full of really great information, just as an FYI. So here we have the list of modules that will be coming up. So right now you are in tools of the job hunting trade. Next one will be the job interview. After that, internet and social media, and we'll be specifically talking about LinkedIn, the ins and outs of that. I would say that's probably one of the most popular topics I get doing career counseling with our customers where I am in Thief River, and I suspect it is for you too. Job search over 50 for workers who are 50 and over. Getting through the job market at that checkpoint in your life can offer a lot of opportunities, but also barriers, and we'll talk about both of those in that career planning and preparing for the job hunt, and then identifying your skills, applications, and portfolios. Those are the ones we've got coming up. So hope you take advantage of all of them. Now, applications. Let's talk a little bit about how applications work and a little bit of this. There's a couple of different things to keep in mind when you do applications versus resumes and why sometimes they ask for both. The first thing is when I talk about applications or an application process, I want you to really understand the first thing is read the directions thoroughly. We don't want to make mistakes on an application because that can sometimes be looked at as our attention to detail or as a proxy for that. So make sure that as you're doing your job applications, you're making sure you're doing things like reading the fine print. And sometimes you'll have to affix a resume or upload a resume to applications. Now, the icons you have beside you are a paper application and a paper resume, but you and I both know that so many companies now have no paper application and they don't take paper resumes. You have to go through a website to do it. There are a few reasons for that. One of those is that those applications are often the legal step through that the company or organization that you're applying at will impose on every applicant, no matter how hard your networking skills are, no matter how great your LinkedIn profile is, everyone who wants to be considered for that role must step through that job application because you agree to things as you submit that application, that you're being truthful and honest and things of that nature. So if it feels like there's redundancy when it comes to that, it is a little bit redundant, but that is sort of the way of things. We just have to make sure that we take our time on applications. There's nothing worse, I'll tell you, than having to rush through a job application because you are near the end of it. The other thing I want to mention, and we'll talk about this a little bit, is making sure that you're logging or tracking the applications that you're submitting for a lot of reasons. We'll talk about this later, but maybe you'll be lucky and you'll find a new job that fits you beautifully right off the bat. Hopefully that'll happen. But if it takes more time, it's very easy to apply for a job that you like and then not hear anything for a little while and you've moved on to other applications and you may not even remember that you submitted that application, but it is still one that you would be a good fit for and that you would want to compete for. And when that's the case, you need to remember what you applied for. And when as somebody who has been on the other side talking to prospective candidates for jobs, there's nothing worse than having them ask questions that are basic to the job and maybe they didn't understand. It makes you sound that you haven't quite done your homework. So making sure that you do all of that. But that's why a lot of times you will be doing both a job application and a resume. Just sending in a resume won't necessarily always be sufficient for putting yourself forward for a job opportunity. Now, again, read the instructions carefully, fill it out completely. You'll notice on a lot of job applications, there'll be required fields and then optional fields. I really want to encourage you that even if a field is not required or compulsory, Fill it out if you have the information at hand and you're able to. It looks better to have more information and more completeness rather than less. So if you are able to fill it out, all the fields that you can, go for it, even if they're not required. And like I said, keep really good records of the jobs that you are applying for, the dates at which you submit the applications, and the resume and cover letter that you may have used. We're going to talk a little bit about more of the iterations and varieties of cover letters and resumes, but making sure that you are keeping all of those in order is really crucial. There is nothing worse than finding a great job and submitting the wrong resume or the wrong cover letter to it for a different job, and knowing that there's nothing you can do to take it back, and it's in there. The cake is baked. And so just being aware of that. Now, when we talk about resumes, I will tell you a couple of things just at 30,000 feet about resumes. There is no magic wand when it comes to resumes. I probably spend about a quarter of my time talking to customers about how resumes can be structured, different ways to accentuate the positive, different ways to strengthen them, polish them. All are great, and we're going to talk about that. But FYI, there isn't necessarily a magic wand. And we're talking about this a lot today, but resumes are both a science and an art form for a whole host of reasons. And that could be based on the industry you hope to go into. If you're involved in a career pivot, sometimes your resumes will need to adapt to that. If you are right out of college, if you're a person or right out of high school that's entering the workforce right out of school, your resumes are going to look a little different. So just there's a whole host of reasons why resumes are going to look. But the first thing I want to tell you is when you do a resume, you want to include just relevant information. Extraneous detail is not going to get you anywhere. A lot of times when I talk to customers, they'll want to throw in everything in the kitchen sink to make it feel as if they've done so many things and are so super accomplished. But they're not necessarily germane or relevant to the core competencies of the job that they're applying for. And when that happens, you're really just kind of clogging it up. We're going to see an example of what clogging up a resume can look like. Secondly, evidence of the skills you have, things that could be verified or things that are substantive or tangible. Not everybody's going to have, I invented Post-it notes or we're not going to have all of that. But things that can quantify and really let an employer sink their teeth into your resume and understand your capabilities. Explaining how you accomplish tasks. If there's one thing that current employers, especially now in 2024, are looking for, it is your ability to accomplish tasks independently and effectively without necessarily needing to draw on resources of other people. So how did you accomplish these tasks that you had in your wheelhouse? Each and every bullet needs to add to the case that you're the person to get interviewed. We're going to talk about this a lot, but when we talk about resumes, we are talking about a sales document. What do I mean by that? It is a document that sells your expertise, your abilities, and your skills. Because realistically, no one is going to hire off of a piece of paper. They're going to want to interview you. So you really want to make sure that you are focusing on that resume, selling a reader, on bringing you in for the interview, because that's how you're going to be getting a job offer is from that experience, not just what's on the paper. Now, again, there's no magic wand. There is no such thing as a perfect resume. If there was a perfect resume, we could all just close up shop and just give you a perfect resume and everything would be great, right? But that's not necessarily the case, again, for where you are in your career, the kind of profession you are. If you're looking at a career pivot, a lot of different ways to format resumes and a lot of different reasons why. So there are different strategies. We're going to provide some best practices and some really sort of time-tested advice that you're going to do that. At the end of the day, however, that resume has to be something that you feel really strongly about is the best articulation of you, because interview questions or follow-up questions in interviews could be derived from the resume you submitted. They may have that right in front of them, and they may ask you a question related to it. If you cannot articulate an answer based on what's in your resume, let me be very clear with you. You will age 6 months in 2 minutes. That's how quickly it will happen. So you really want to make sure that you understand and feel very strongly that your resume is your best articulation of your capabilities and skills. So we can use a little acronym here. So resumes, review of your qualifications. They are a synopsis of all that you have done, your educational attainment, your skill building, your expertise. All of those things are what that's going to do. Essential information only, like I talked about. Don't be um, don't buy into the idea that more is better and just throwing more information into a resume will spellbind a reader because of how much is in there. Quite the opposite. We're going to talk about and give you an example of that, but essential core information is what you want to articulate there. Skills based. Again, employers who are looking at resumes are often looking at many resumes, especially for really competitive fields or competitive jobs. So you want to make sure that that reader can look at your resume and think this person has the skills to be able to onboard quickly and efficiently. What is unique about you? One of the things when I do resume reviews, if you've ever come to me for a resume review, one of the things I'm going to tell you is, whether it's key skills section or whether it's a professional summary, whatever it is, I want to read about who you are and what are the skills you have that are unique and distinct. Because if it's the same type of language like I find on 20 other resumes, it's not going to sink in. So you really want to make a case for your uniqueness. It's a marketing product, like I talked. It's a sales document. It is selling you to the reader or readers, depending on what kind of field you're going into. You may have more than one reader looking at that to make a hiring decision. It markets you. That's a sales document. It's effective. It sticks with the reader. It gets you noticed. It's going to pull that reader in and hold their attention on your resume. That is one of the most important parts of that sales document of your resume, is that it's pulling people in and keeping them reading. That is the most important thing. And it should go without saying, but I'm going to say it anyway. Each resume, each cover letter, each application that you submit needs to be targeted or tailored to each job. You may have an exemplary sort of point of departure resume, but you want to make sure that every time you submit that resume, it is tailored to the job. It mentions the job. It talks about the core competencies of the job as articulated in the job posting. All of those things that line up with your skills. That is what you want when you talk about what a resume needs to be specifically targeted to. Again, keep it brief. I'm going to show you something called a heat map in just a minute, and you'll see how important it is to articulate things in a concise manner. So remember that. And then remember, nobody's going to hire off of paper. They're going to look at that, even if it's just a dazzling resume, spellbinding even. They're going to want to interview you first. They're not going to do that. So that's what that resume's job is. It can be great, it can be solid, but the goal of that resume is to pull you into an interview. And of course, we have a creative job search module on interviewing as well. So hopefully you'll tune in for that one. But that is what a resume is. At the end of the day, when the rubber meets the road, down to brass tacks, whatever you want to use, that is what a resume is for. Now, the heat map. This is what I want to describe. Now, when you look at this, well, what am I looking at here, Jason? Well, let me tell you. So these are two different resumes that you can see, and the warmth indicated by red and yellow and orange colors are where the reader of these resumes, how long their eyes were on each resume. When you look at the one on the right, you can see that this resume held the reader's attention all the way down to the education section at the very end. Bullets, concise, a very strongly articulated professional statement at the beginning, all the way down. Look on the left. Do you see the block quotes? Do you see the block pieces? A lot of text kind of rolling in there. You can tell by about 2/3 of the way down, The reader stopped reading. There's nothing underneath that fourth up bullet from the bottom. They just stopped. They didn't even get to the end. That's what I talk about when I talk about making sure that essential and concise information is articulated. Don't succumb to the temptation to just add, and have block quotes, block quotes, block quotes. The average reader for this is going to review the resume not in necessarily minutes, but sometimes seconds as they do this. And they may have, particularly for very competitive jobs, they may read it very quickly. So you want to be able to make your case in your resume as quickly as possible. So think about this as you're articulating yourself in your resume, and try to avoid those long sentences, block quotations, bullets that go on and on. They're not going to have the impact that you may believe they are. So consider this as we move forward. Now, make it scannable. Now, when I say make it scannable, I mean by my eyes, not by a computer. We'll talk about that in a minute. But bolding and capital letters used judiciously and with restraint can really draw a reader into something that is key, whether those are professional awards you've won, whether those are accomplishments that are really, really of note. That really brings the reader into that. Do not make half of your resume bold or capitalized. As much as you may want to highlight that, don't do that. Make sure it's key stuff. Italics, underlines, those types of things, text boxes and colors are to be avoided. And we're going to talk about why. But when it is scanned by what's called ATS, if you've ever heard that, Applicant Tracking Systems, when you do that, those can sometimes scramble their ability to scan that resume before it gets to a human being. And when that happens, it can, like an egg you scramble for breakfast, it can scramble the formatting of your resume, making it much harder for a human reader to discern your skills and abilities. So try to avoid those types of things and use bold and capitalization to emphasize where you need to emphasize. Now, remember, honest and positive, it should go without saying, do not exaggerate on your resume. Do not go and talk about things that you did not do on your resume, because again, you may be asked about those questions on your interview if you're interviewed. And if they're not honest and candid, again, you're going to age 6 months in 2 minutes if you're caught in a lie. So don't do that, whatever you do, because they may derive questions from that. Focusing on the accomplishments you have, and they're targeted to the position. And what I mean by that is you are lining up the core competencies of the job that you are looking at and hoping to compete for with the skills you bring to bear, and making sure they align. And so when I say that, I mean making sure that you're looking at the job posting, you're considering its qualifications and core competencies, and you're thinking very quickly about how you meet those and how those can be articulated in your resume so that you can edit the resume so that it becomes targeted to that position. If it feels like you are overqualified, then you have too many things, then you haven't done as tight of a job as targeting as you could have. Because again, we just talked about simplicity, being concise. Those are virtues when it comes to resumes. So you don't have to, and this is especially the case for people. If you've been at a company for 25 years, you may have multiple roles in that company, and you may be eminently qualified for a job you're applying for, but it doesn't come across that way. So remember, do not be afraid of paring things down and making cuts to a resume. It may be hard to do because it's part of the job that you did and you love that part of that job, or it was something that you were really great at, but if it's not aligned with the core competencies of the next job, it's not as targeted as it needs to be. All right, choosing a format. Now we're going to talk about that in just a minute, but making sure that you have a format and that you stick with that format throughout your resume is critical. It's always something interesting when I see 3 different fonts going on in a resume. When I was on the hiring side, when I would see that in a cover letter, or when I would see that in a resume, I would always look and think, hmm, hmm. It would always just sort of give me pause. So choose a format and please stick with it. So same font, same, the consistent size of the font, all of that. The top 1/3 of your resume is the most valuable. Why is that? Well, think of it this way. Have you ever been in a bookstore and taken a book off the shelf, read a couple pages, not for me, put it back, and you do that over and over? The top of that resume is like that. You are making the case to hold that attention of the reader for as long as possible. So that top part, that is where that reader is going to make the decision to either continue to skim and move on or read it more closely, read a little bit longer, look at the qualifications a little bit in more detail. That's what you want. That's a resume that gets an interview right there. So remember that top third is where we naturally start making the decision to continue or not. So really think about how to make an impact, both in terms of the words you use and visually, the top third of that resume. Include some white space. White space is humane to your reader. An ATS doesn't care about white space, but a reader does, because it makes it more readable, makes it easier to read, makes it easier on the eyes, and invites that reader to spend more time on the stuff that you do have. I cannot emphasize this enough. Proofread that resume. Do not just hit spell check. Spell check will grab a few things out of there, but please proofread your resume. And if you're not sure if you're doing it right, because honestly, let's be real, when you're doing multiple resumes and you're looking at it over and over again, it's so easy to gloss over a grammatical mistake, a spelling mistake, something in there that needs to change. Have a friend, have somebody that you know, look it over. You can always go to your local career force, and the email you'll get about this will have a list of your local career forces, and come in for a resume review. Make an appointment for a resume review where we can take a look at that and do a close reading so we can give you an idea of if we find any of those errors that you may just gloss over, which is such a human thing, but making sure, because you're a reader, that's the first time they're going to read it. And so if there are errors, if there are mistakes, they will find it, and it will look like you don't have the attention to detail for the job. And every job requires attention to detail, no matter what it is. So something to be aware of. Now, you can do resume formatting a few different ways. Different ones are better for different types of people or different skill sets. And we're going to talk a little bit about the advantages of each. So chronological, that's the classic. That's the Coca-Cola of resumes. That's the one we all know and love, right? It's the one that's organized by job history, from to present, this to that, this to that, all of that. That's a chronological one. It's the one you probably learned how to make in high school. It's the one that you've seen over and over again in Microsoft Word templates. All of those are chronological, classic. Now, functional are organized by skills. So especially for people, like I said, who are just graduating from high school or college, functional are often better because they can highlight what you can do. You may not have had a lengthy job history yet because you're young, and you may want to use that kind of resume for that. Now, a word about functional versus chronological. Each resume is going to have, no matter what, a job-based history. Functional can emphasize and accentuate your skills and capabilities, but you will still have a job history on your functional resume. You won't have no dates. That's not going to happen. But just FYI, the functional can really accentuate your capabilities and your abilities. And there can be combination resumes. So combination can do a little bit of both. And we're going to talk a little bit about that. Now, the format that you choose tells your story best. But be that as it may, no matter what format, they're targeted and tailored to the job you're applying for every time. It specifically mentions the core competencies of that job. It aligns your skills with the core competencies of that job. It talks about why you're a good fit for that job, no matter which one you do. So why don't we pause? I know that there's some questions going on. So my moderators, if anyone wants to dip in and see if there's any questions for me in the chat.
Hi there. This is Nyquila, and it does look like we do have a few questions that just popped in the chat.
Sure.
Angela has a question here. She says, do you need to target every experience on the resume to each job?
So what you're asking is, do I drill down to every single bullet point and make every single bullet point that? I would say each bullet needs to align with the core competencies to some degree. That could be a very easy fix. That could be a whole renovation. Um, so you really want to do that because, and as laborious as that sounds, remember that the resume is the first introduction to you that reader's going to have. They're not going to run into you at the post office. They're not going to meet you in the supermarket. This is all you get. And so you want to make sure that you do take the time to tailor and target each resume towards the core competencies and responsibilities of that job. So yeah, the answer is yes.
And it does look like we have another question here
Sure.
from Jean. What if you are, I believe this is supposed to says, what if you are on Indeed or another platform
Mhm.
that has you store your resume?
So I want to just be aware that, those resumes, so when you go to those types of platforms, sometimes those resumes are there and you can apply for them using that, but sometimes the company will redirect you anyway to go to their website. So let me make a case for minnesotaworks.net here instead of some of those for a couple of reasons. One is we have people behind minnesotaworks.net that are making sure that those are real jobs that are posted in a timely manner. And so there's real human verification going on there. We maintain that and we keep very, very good tabs on that site. So when you use that one and you put your resume on minnesotaworks.net, employers are able to use keywords and grab your resumes that way, as well as you are able to see application links for jobs that you're interested in through Minnesota Works directly on that company site. So you're not getting stuck in the in between. I have had customers who have tried that with like in LinkedIn or Indeed with apply with one click, only to find out later that they have an email auto response saying, thanks for your interest. Here's the actual link. But by the time they realize that has happened, the job is closed. So let me really make the case for using minnesotaworks.net more actively than any other because it's really a good platform for your job search.
And one more here, which is from Christine. On the resume auto scan tool that so many employers use this tool,
Yep.
where do you put in your pertinent keywords? Example, if a employer wants someone with IT experience,
Mhm.
listing years of IT experience, can you list anywhere or within a certain section?
So applicant tracking softwares are often more calibrated to chronological resumes. So they like the dates, but remember that they don't have the powers of discernment that you and I have as a human being. So what they're doing is they're just matching what's articulated in the job posting to what you have in your resume, and they're just pulling them together and seeing how much of a match you are. And that's pretty much what they do. They again, they don't have independent judgment. They're not people. So when you're writing your resume, I want you to look at what are the core competencies and key areas of skill sets that that job posting is saying you need to be successful. And then I want you to import or pull in those things, action verbs especially, into your resume in the same manner that they're articulated, because that's what an applicant tracking software is doing. Again, it doesn't have any powers of discernment like a human being. All it has is the ability to match things and look at formats and pull them together. So just as an FYI, that's what you're kind of dealing with sometimes with those applicant tracking systems. So, all right, so let's crack in because I want to talk more about resumes and how they lay out, because now we're really getting into the heart of the matter here. So this is a chronological resume. Like I have said before, this is the bread and butter resume. It's the kind of resume that you probably studied when you were in high school or when you first started being told you got to get your resume together. This is often kind of what you've done. A couple things about this I want to just show you. Um, has the name, the phone number, the email, LinkedIn profile. Excellent. You do not need to put your home address in your resume, and people don't necessarily need to know where you live when you're doing your job application. But having all your pertinent contact information is very important. Making sure that if you have a LinkedIn profile, you have a URL to that. That's critical, and I want you to just remember that. Please do register for our LinkedIn social media creative job search if you're unsure on how to create or format or accentuate a LinkedIn profile. It is chock full of good information. The summary. Now, remember when we talked about the first 1/3 of that resume being really important? That's this. It's articulating substantive achievements that we can look at. $2 million, acceptance of 99.5%, and the selected skills are not so vague and generic that they could apply to anyone here, but they are giving both hard and soft skills that people are going to look for. And then it has that employment history as well. And then it brings down into the education where that person has earned their training. Now, this is a functional resume. This is what I mean when I say accentuating skills, accentuating capabilities. That's what a functional resume does. Now, this is going to be kind of very, very specific to you, but this is really helpful, especially for younger workers entering the job market for the first time. You're not going to have, you know, 6 different things that you have. Usually when we talk about resume links, we'll say, between 10 and 15 years of job history, going back that long is typically okay. But you're just entering the job market. You may not even have 5 years of job history. Maybe your first job was when you were in college or high school. So you need to showcase capabilities and things you're really good at, things you can bring to the table that align with those job core competencies in the job posting. Note that it will still talk about education and training at the bottom. So it will still have some information about where you've been and what you've been up to, but it will draw the reader into your capabilities as well. Again, has the name, has the phone number, has the email, don't need your home address, and it really highlights kind of those four top things that really what you want to do. This is the combination resume that I mentioned. Now, again, this has that summary statement. It has core skills, but then under employment history, it still has the dates of employment everywhere. So there's still that, as well as education that was obtained and achieved by this applicant. So this brings together both the skills and the employment history. Now I know what everybody's going to be asking, and well, which one should I use? And that's hard to answer because every single person has a different job history, and none of us have the exact same job tracks. So a couple things. If you're concerned that you're not using the right resume, that your resume hasn't been getting you invitations to interview, if you feel like there might be something that you want to really accentuate on the resume that's not coming through in what you're currently using, make an appointment for a resume review with a career force locally for you. We can do those types of things and help you make sure that you're using the right kind of resume for your needs and the kind of career goals that you have. So first and foremost, come in and let's talk. Secondly, it really depends on if you're involved in a career pivot or not. I will tell you right now that people who move from one industry to the next sometimes want to move from one resume to another, depending on the formatting and how radical that pivot is. So it's hard necessarily for me to tell you exactly which one you should use because I love that there's over 90 people here, but I don't know all of you personally, so I can't tell you exactly which one you should use. Remember when I said it's also a science and an art form, it is that. So if you're worried about your resume and and its formatting, make an appointment for some resume review at your local career force and we can help you with that. Now, basic core resume parts. Now take a look here. So this is what we've got. Now this person obviously is fictional. She has her objective, she has her summary, she has her professional experience, and her education. Those are the meat and potatoes of any format, no matter what you have, of your resume. There's not going to be a resume that doesn't include those things. And any resume that doesn't isn't targeted enough to probably get you an interview. So that's really important. The objective and the summary, Those are important because that's where, as a reader, if I'm a human being and I'm reading this, that's where I make the decisions like, okay, she's interested in our company. She knows a little bit about our company. Let's keep going. And then I can look at the experience that this person has. Now, this person has been involved in industrial design and a lot of different kinds of architectural and mechanical engineering. So they're going to have a lot of different things on there, but they're going to have this. And then they're going to have their education. Okay. That's the basic part of it. One. Now, again, all contact information, easy to get a hold. I can pick up the phone and call this person. But what's missing? I know you know what's missing, but I'm just going to say, um, there's no email address, right? Emails are pretty critical. And like I said, LinkedIn. If you have LinkedIn, which again, if you're not sure whether LinkedIn is right for you, our creative job search module will really help you. That's what it should look like. Email, LinkedIn, town. Again, doesn't need the road she lives on or where she is. Just something to think about. Summary. Short. Yep, it is. But when you make it more individualized and unique, remember the U in resume when you talk about unique, that's what pulls a reader in. And that's what you really want that reader to look at. Like, this is interesting. Okay, this is, that's pulling that reader in with that top 1/3 of your resume. Now, this is her job history. Now, I know immediately, I know that your eyes went right to the dates and the dates aren't aligned. I know that, but there's more than that. I want to talk about that. So when you talk about professional experience, it has the dates that you were there, the company, the town, as well as bullets that really articulate, again, against the core competencies of that job and how they align, because that's what that person who's reading it is worried about. They're not necessarily worried about what you did in the past and that job. That's not what they're hiring for. They're hiring for this job here in front of us right now, and they want to know exactly how your expertise and experience line up with the company's needs and goals for that job you're applying for. Right? I know where this is going. Again, qualifications, talking about each one, talking about the things that they did, making sure that they're articulated and designed in a more substantive way than what's articulated here in this resume. And then the education part. I know where you're going with this. Talks about where it was, the bachelor's degree, all of that right there. Now, again, when I talk about resume formatting, this is the kind of stuff that can change the calculus for you. If you are a veteran, and if you are a veteran, thank you very much for your service. I appreciate you being here. But include the military experience. That there are many, many employers that are deeply interested in investing in veterans, especially as new hires. So make sure that you articulate that in there if you're comfortable doing that, because that can really boost the resume in terms of who should we interview. Volunteer experiences. As we talk about our skills, one of the things we talk about in this identifying your skills module is your skills can come from any number of places, including meaningful volunteer experiences. So include in volunteer experiences where you have gleaned skills and knowledge. Leadership experience and professional memberships. A lot of times we'll be a member of professional guilds or things that will help us be more articulate and more seasoned in our jobs. Any awards or recognitions you've received, and any up-to-date training certificates that you have. All of that can get included into a resume, particularly if they're relevant and salient for the job that you're interested in that career, because those can document transferable skills. Now, accomplishment statements. Remember when we talked about action verbs and action, that's what we're talking about. We're talking about action words, details, and the outcomes those are accomplishment statements. So the action verbs are the things you had to do, the things you've done, and the things that you had to discharge as part of that job. The details of what you were doing and how you were doing it, and the results of your actions. Those are accomplishments. And those are the things that you want to articulate. I can see the questions in the chat. Don't worry, we'll have more time at the end, I promise. But the accomplishments are important because readers of your resume may not be familiar with the organizations that you're coming from, particularly if you're involved in a career pivot, but they will be able to understand your capability and your ability to hit the ground running. And that's how accomplishment statements articulate that. And that's what you want them to hold on to. And remember, those are the types of things that you would want to bold or capitalize in a resume to really bring the readers to that as a part of your resume, because those are those things that stick with them in their memory when it comes time for them to make decisions about who is getting interviews. So accomplishment statements, real critical, and that's how you can kind of formulate them based on your job history and what you did. So we're gonna do a little activity. You didn't think you were getting homework. Don't worry, I promise this is not too hard. So tasks versus accomplishments, okay? Kept inventory, called customers, right? Those are some things. Let's say you're working in a warehouse. Let's say you were working in supply chain. Those would certainly apply, especially if you were in there. Those are things that you did, right? And so in your head, think of tasks, and I'm willing to bet that you have a resume where you have these on there, just tasks that you did. Think about those tasks that you have on your resume in your head. You don't have to share them in the chat. Just think of them in your head. Now, I want to talk a little bit about how that differs from accomplishments. So, kept inventory or managed daily inventory of 1,000 classifications of medical supplies. These are both the same things, right? They're not different. You did them from the day to day. But do you see how the accomplishment really allows a reader to sink their teeth into that resume and really understand, oh, you were organized. You had to have good attention to detail. You had to be on top of all of these tasks and making sure that everything was tracked. Called customers. Yes, these two are the same. Or grew a client base from 0 to 70 within 2 months using effective calling techniques. Completely different. There's no comparison. And I'll tell you, if somebody reads this, which person is going to be interviewed? There's, again, no comparison. So think about the accomplishments of your actions, not just sort of the tasks you had to discharge on the day to day. Yes, you had to keep an inventory, and yes, you had to call customers, right? But you and I both know that there's so much more to either of those tasks. And I know that there's tasks on your resume that there was so much more to that you could articulate if you took a step back and thought about the accomplishments versus just the day-to-day tasks. Okay, cover letters. I will tell you, if there's one question I get about cover letters, like, do I have to have a cover letter? Do I need a cover letter? I heard cover letters are out of style now. Very few places are doing that. Yes, it is true that some employers are moving away from cover letters. However, it is also true that many still ask you to submit one. And when you don't have a cover letter and have to synthesize it from scratch, it takes much longer than if you have one ready that you can adapt. Here's why. Here's what a cover letter does. It is another step to market your expertise and skills to the prospective employer, but it also allows you to create a synopsis of your capabilities for that employer and draw their attention to that in that resume in a short, sweet, and concise manner. That's what a cover letter does. It's not the forward to War and Peace. It's not that. Again, just with resumes, don't be don't give in to the temptation to write more because you think more is better. Cover letters, again, they're a synopsis to bring the reader over to your expertise and why you're a good fit for that new role. What should a cover letter have? So straight up says, this is my intent and this is why I'm a good fit for this job, why I'm interested, what makes me a strong candidate. Tell them how you match their needs and a thank you. You can also say you'll follow up with them in XYZ, ABC, whatever if you want to do that. Like I said, it's not a page long. Shouldn't be. But it's reiterating your skills and your capabilities in a concise way and drawing that employer's eyes over to your resume and the key portions of it. Again, like I said, careerforcemn.com, please come in for a resume review. I can tell you right now, there's nothing as refreshing as having somebody sit down with you and go over in a no stakes environment to how you can strengthen that. It sometimes can be a little humbling, but in the email that you'll get, it will have a list of the closest of this link for you to find your closest career force so you can make an appointment for resume reviews, and that will really help. Or if you just don't know where to start and how do I begin resumes, some of you may not have had a resume for a while and need to go from that, or a cover letter. We're there to help. Okay, I know there have been questions in the chat that have been flying, so now is the time for us to answer those questions. So, if my, yeah.
All right. Hello. So let's see what we have as far as the questions go here. It looks like there was one that was left by Carly. And let's see here. Carly had asked, you had mentioned that we could have you guys check over our resume. How do we go about that?
Yep. So when you find, basically, it's quite simple. When you find your closest career force, you'll find the contact information on the webpage. You can just give them a call and say, I attended this creative job search and I need to make an appointment for a resume review. They'll know exactly what that means and they'll be able to help you make an appointment.
And following that, we have Julie that has a question here. What if you are an older worker, over 64? How much work history do you include?
You know, I'll tell you something. When I would venture a guess that almost probably another 25% of the work I do with customers deals with concerns about ageism as they apply for new jobs. And a lot of those questions rely on or come from a place that they're afraid that they'll be revealing too much about themselves, their age, and they want to cloak that. First and foremost, I highly recommend registering for our job search after 50 creative job search module. It's a wealth of information that you can have that will help you kind of articulate the best foot forward. Secondly, come in for a resume review one-on-one at your local career force, and we can talk about where you should draw that line. As we said before, 10 to 15 years is often the dividing line of where you want to go for that. But then I know the next follow-up question is, well, right, but when I got my college degree or when I graduated from high school, I put the year in, they're going to see how old I am. There's not a lot you can do to cloak that. And I'll just tell you, for some of us, we just have to own that and come in for career counseling. We do career counseling to a career force, and we can talk a little bit about how to interview and articulate yourself in the best way if possible. Because people who are over 50 looking for work bring a whole host of strengths and capabilities to the job market that can't be replicated otherwise. And we can emphasize and accentuate those positives in a career counseling and resume review session.
Right. And then Tracy had a question here, which the link was put in the chat on how you can sign up for that LinkedIn webinar.
Yep.
Samuel has a question here. What if in the last 20 years, you've only had two jobs or two job history and the current position you're applying for is 12 years ago? How do you format your resume?
Right. So what's you may have had a job for a very long time, like 12 years, and then you had another job for 8 years. So it looks like you only had two jobs, when in reality you've probably had several more than that, but you can't go. Typically, what I would say is when you have a resume that has that, it's okay to mention that you were at this company for that long and include a detailed list of accomplishments that you did at that company that again are targeted and tailored to that new job, each one. And so if you want to go, you can, if you feel like, put more on there if it goes beyond that if you would like, if you feel comfortable doing that, making sure that any jobs that you add into that are articulated in a way that is targeted to the next job you're applying for, and again articulates accomplishments that you are able to point to and talk about. So you can go forward if you want to draw back, you can. It's not going to be a deficit to you.
And then we do have another question here from Christina. How many years would you say is too many years of experience?
Oh gosh, another, yeah, there's no such thing as too many years of experience in my mind. And I know that one of the things that we talk about in job search over 50 is that, people often will think, oh, you're overqualified, or, those types of things, that are in there. And what I usually say is, having too much expertise is not is not a real thing, but we sometimes can think it is because we're concerned that we'll be looked as overqualified or as someone who is behind the times, or you fill in the blank, right? So there's no such thing as too much expertise on a resume, so long as that expertise again is targeted to the job you're applying for. There's no such thing. So put your best foot forward.
All right, and then a question here. I believe it's from She. For education, what should you put if you have some college, 5 years, but no degree?
So here's what I say to that. You went to college, you paid for your classes, you got the knowledge, you put that down. Even if you didn't graduate, you can just put that you attended, dates of attendance, even if you didn't earn that degree, and include the coursework that's relevant to the job you're applying for. If there is relevant coursework, and there probably is, make sure that you articulate that, because coursework that you took in college, even without the degree, still points to transferable skills that you could have. So make sure you do articulate that. Don't leave it off. Get credit for what you did and the work you accomplished.
And Tracy asked, how do you choose references? Some of my previous employers no longer exist, like they're retired or moved on, etc.
Yep. So typically what I say is a part of this, reaching out to references that that will give you testimony to the skills that you have and the capabilities you have is critical. Now, for those of you who have references who have retired, just because people are retired does not mean that they can't be references for you. Especially if you worked with somebody for 15 or 20 years and they retired, so what? If they're still willing to be a reference, you can absolutely put that the function they had, and you just put in parentheses retired, and then they can use their personal phone number and personal email if they're comfortable giving that out. So people who are retired are still absolutely relevant for being references. Think of who is going to be giving you the best and strongest recommendations for the kind of work you're hoping to do.
And William asked, can you do a one-on-one for a resume review?
Yep. At any all of our career forces locally, that's our bread and butter is resumes. So make sure you check out your local career force, give them a buzz, make an appointment for a resume review, and you can go from there and really polish up what you have and refine it. Or if you're not sure where to begin, we can talk about how to start from scratch as well.
And following that along, from William, what is proper follow-up timing after sending that clearly states resume submission deadline?
Sure, sure. So so what you're asking is typically when you submit an application with a resume, you'll get an auto email saying thank you for your application, something something. If it doesn't have inside the email, we will be connecting with you or making decisions within. If it doesn't give you a timetable in that email, usually I say 1 to 2 business weeks is appropriate to follow up based on what the the auto confirmation, assuming you get one, contains. If you don't get an auto confirmation, sometimes you don't, then usually I would say 1 to 2 weeks is perfectly acceptable to follow up and making sure that they have received that. It shows initiative. And so long as you're just making sure that you're doing a follow-up, you're not burdening them with anything. You're just making sure that they know that you're interested again.
Next question we have here is the CJS over 50. Does it still make sense for someone 69 years of
Absolutely,
age?
absolutely. We don't stop at any age. It's just after 50, because the factors that are alive and well in the job market affect everybody in that fashion. So I highly recommend it.
And we do have another question here from Julie. How detrimental are lapses in employment?
Here's what I say. If there are lapses there that you want to talk about, you know, if you feel comfortable, if it's not too personal, you can address that in the resume. So, for instance, if you are right now on the job market hunting for a job, this is work. This takes effort and time and energy. You can put that on the resume. If you're caring for a loved one and were in a dependent care capacity and you're comfortable talking about that, you go ahead and do that. You can talk about, a dependent care relationship. And at your local career force, we can go and you can tell us that one-on-one, and we can help you articulate how to put that in there so that there isn't a lapse. Because it wasn't like you were sucked into a black hole, right? And then you just got spat out 5 months later or something like that. You didn't, like you were doing something, whether it was again, caring for a partner, a member of your family, doing this type of work in the job hunt, you were doing something. So it's perfectly acceptable to think about how to do that. So usually I say when you think of job gaps or lapses in employment, my guess is there's something there that you can articulate that was real work and was demanding that you should be able to talk about. Employers that see that will understand we're human too. Employers are human. They understand that that can happen. Else, got time for a couple more.
Well, this one might carry us through because we have
Okay.
yeah, it's necessarily a loaded question, but there's a few things here. But how do you add in skills from training or a certification as part of your core skills alongside work skills gained on the job?
Perfect. That's a great question. And that especially is if it's things that you received as a licensure or something like that, or a course of study that you undertook, credit for learning or continuing education, those types of things. Absolutely great point. Typically, what I will do is when you have those experiences, put them underneath, like, certifications and trainings as a separate part of your resume, and then articulate what you did and then those skills as well as incorporating that into the key skills portion. If you put a key skills portion on the top of your resume, like you saw in one of the examples, those can be assimilated and incorporated into that key section as well. So you can do that in two different ways if you want to.
Now, we are running short on time. There
Okay.
are a few
Well,
more questions.
okay. All right. Well, you know what? We could be here for 3 hours, guys. But remember that you will get a lot of supplementary information by the end of business tomorrow that will have this recording as well as a lot of really good pieces of information to follow up on. And this is the beginning of a dialogue on the job hunt, not the end. So don't if you feel like we didn't get to your question, trust me, we have resources to get those answered at your local career forces. So otherwise, everyone, it was a joy to have everybody here today. Thank you for being here. All of you, stay warm. Make sure you wear warm hat and mittens today, and hopefully we'll see you at your next creative job search and at your next local career force. Take care, everybody. Bye.